The following broadcast is intended for mature audiences. These are real people sharing very real, deeply personal experiences. This content may be considered triggering for others and for those who are sharing. The chat room is a privilege intended for discussions and sharing. You are not being asked to agree, but you are being asked to stay civil and refrain from personal attacks. Listener discretion is advised.
All right, welcome back. This is Am I Mental? It is a weekly live podcast where real people share real stories about living their lives with mental health issues. I am the host, E, and with us, as most of the time, we have our co-host, KZ.
Hello.
So go ahead and tell us what happened to you, KZ.
Well, I'm not sure if it was told, but the first week of missing the show, I was actually out of state for a job interview. Last week was not as entertaining, though. Some health complications with my Crohn's, and then also passing a couple of kidney stones kind of had me laid up for a little bit. So, feeling a lot better.
Glad you're feeling better. All right, and with us tonight, we do have our guest, Shelley T. Go ahead and say hi.
Hello, everybody. Glad to be here tonight.
Glad to have you on. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what we are going to talk about tonight?
We're going to talk about basically families with autism, dealing with autism, the parent side of it, and just basically, the struggles of basically going from diagnosis to adulthood. My son is now 22 years old, so I've been dealing with autism for a very long time. And it's definitely been a roller coaster, and it definitely is something that very much affects my daily life and affected our family life. So, yeah.
Yeah, and as I was kind of pushing out there through the little teasers, that this is not exactly something that most people would even consider being part of the show, but once you really think about it, and the fact that it does impact you, you're in a unique situation, it does have a lot of struggles, it is going to wear down on you mentally, emotionally, physically, because you're in an atypical situation, that, absolutely, you would be perfect for this podcast. You still need help, when your situation is real and it needs to be acknowledged.
Right. Well, and add in the additional thing of being a military family and dealing with 6 deployments. So, I mean, being alone, was a big thing in my life. And having 3 children alone, one with autism, and having to navigate systems and moves and stuff with 3 children and one having a severe, disability, basically. So, right. And that became a huge part of my life. It consumed my life from the moment he was diagnosed, which wasn't until 4. And I'll go into a little bit about that if you want me to just go ahead and dive into that.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about before the diagnosis, when you started noticing things were different, so that way we could kind of get a little bit of the background to it leading up to this.
Sure, absolutely. Well, Noah was my only child out of the 3 that I had that was born naturally, and that was a little traumatic. He was the only child being born at West Point Military Academy, the small little hospital there. So they were waiting for me to have him. I was 9 days overdue. The nurses were waiting for me to come in, and I wound up going into labor, and by the time the doctor got there, it was too late to have an epidural or anything like that. So I had to have him naturally. And Noah's umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck. And it was wrapped around his neck to the point where he was blue. And the doctor actually literally got in my face and screamed at me and told me I needed to stop pushing. And that's a little hard when you're going through natural childbirth. Anyone who has been through that, it's not like you're like, what do you mean stop pushing?
Yeah, it's like
I want this to be over with.
Being a dad of watching 4 of my kids be born, I know that your body, every fiber, every molecule of your body is saying push.
Yes, yeah.
It's like
it's almost involuntary. That like, what do you I was like, I don't even know how to stop this at this point. You know what I mean? But it was very scary. She
like
had
trying to stop
cut,
a pee midstream.
yeah, like yeah, uh, or yeah, but she had to cut the umbilical cord. I mean, it was wrapped good around his neck at least 3 times. And she had to cut it from his neck. Um, and
Good doctor
yeah,
to get that taken care of.
yeah. His APGAR score was very low from the get-go. Normally an APGAR score is, supposed to be, I believe, on the higher level, like 9 or 10. Like I think 10 is the highest. He was at about a 5 or a 6. And when they took him from me, they took him for a very long time. So I was like very nervous. You know what I mean? I was very nervous. Um, you know, but I didn't start. I mean, Noah going through the first couple of years of life, he wasn't making milestones. I do have an older child to compare him to, so he wasn't babbling. He wasn't holding his bottle. He wasn't sitting up. He didn't walk until 18 months. He never, well, no, wait, I take that back. He crawled at about 18 months, and he never crawled like a normal child. He crawled on his back. He did this weird back neck crawl. It was really, really strange. But that was the way he scooted around.
So not even quite like a crab walk.
No, it was an upside down crab walk. Literally, you were like, "What are you doing to your neck?" Like it was like weird. Yeah, and and that was at about 18 months, and it was probably at about 2 that he started to walk and was, just very behind in everything. But over those 2 years, Noah had a lot of health issues. We He would aspirate drinking bottles. He would get
Ooh.
pneumonia, basically, because he had low muscle tone all over his body. So even in his mouth, so he had to be propped up to drink a bottle, basically, because if he was laying down completely, a slight drop of any kind of, you know, formula, water, whatever, goes into your lungs, and that causes pneumonia.
Right. And when your
So,
lungs are that tiny.
yeah. So, I mean, we spent for the first 2 years, I mean, it was constant pneumonia, RSV. We even dealt with a collapsed lung, and that was a traumatic experience because he was so sick for the first 2 years that there was a point that I was like, I'm tired of taking him to the emergency room. I said to my husband, I said, you take him this time, like, can you, your turn. I want a break. I always take him. Please go. And he took him, and he came back and he said he has 2 ear infections, or double ear infections. And the kid was wheezing. His chest was convulsing. Okay, like he was in clear distress with breathing issues. This was not just an ear infection.
Right. There's more to it than just the ears.
Yeah. And we wound up in a helicopter going to Valhalla Hospital down near New York City, where he was treated for a collapsed lung and stayed in the hospital with pneumonia and RSV. And yeah, that was scary. That was scary. And, so, but I mean, he was a sick child for those first 2 years. So we were in pediatricians' offices all the time between, the sicknesses and stuff like that. And I was always asking, he's not babbling, he's not talking, he's not sitting up, he's not crawling, and everybody would be like, oh, well, let's wait till he's a year. Let's wait till he's 15 months to evaluate him. Let's wait.
And that has got to be frustrating, knowing that there's something going on and not being, and almost like you weren't being taken seriously. They just kept pushing you off.
Well, I mean, it was a military hospital, and I mean, I was going up there, and I was bothering if one pediatrician didn't want to listen to me, I went to the next one, and then I went to the next one that would, I was like, okay, I'm not going to see you anymore. I'm going to go to the next one until they finally got me to a pediatric developmentalist who said, okay, he does qualify for speech, OT, and physical therapy because of the low muscle tone all over his body, the speech delay at this point, and the lack of fine motor skills because he couldn't even hold his own bottle.
Wow. Yeah. I mean,
You know what I mean? And feed himself and stuff like that. So that did start at about 15 to 18 months, I'd say, for Noah. Um, and then we
I
moved.
was gonna say usually by that point, I mean, like all of my kids, they were eating finger foods at that point.
Right, and feeding themselves and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And I mean, like, and I was still feeding him as if he was almost like a 4 month old. You know what I mean? Like with stuff. I mean, he was eating some solid food, but like you had to be very careful because he wouldn't chew like because of the low muscle tone in his mouth. He wouldn't chew things right, so we'd have to make sure that things were cut up very small, and that we would have to verbally tell him like, make sure you're chewing, make sure you're chewing that, so that we didn't wind up with aspiration after aspiration with the pneumonia. I mean, there was one year that we were at West Point that he was the very first case of RSV in August.
Wow.
And yes, and that for the northern, I'm sorry about if you can hear the ambulances, I'm sorry. But basically, yeah, I mean, that's early for that area, that normally doesn't go till like November, like normally it's like November through February or something like that and he was the very first case. But yeah, but yeah, so he got into those therapies, which were great. He did wonderful. It was a great thing. They came into the home because he was under 3. So he got those therapies.
Yeah, and
Well,
I mean, one of my kids had to go through at least speech therapy, and it is really great that they can. Some places they'll send you to your home. We had that too. It was nice.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And Noah still does speech today. So, but yeah. So, going from there, we moved shortly after that to Fort Rucker, Alabama. My ex-husband went to flight school and we moved down there, and Noah turned 3, which meant he went into the school system, for speech and OT.
Yep.
And for basically a little half-day program, which was fine. That worked out fine for the short little 18 months that we were there.
And for people that aren't sure what OT is, occupational therapy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Like brushing your teeth, brushing your hair, getting dressed, tying your shoes, stuff like that.
Exactly. Buttoning, snapping, zipping, all that stuff. Yeah.
I know this because my mother took a traumatic brain injury and had to go through some OT. So that's how I learned about it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I'm sorry. I do definitely correct me if I start using acronyms. That's partly the Army and the medical part of everything,
Yeah, no problem.
It's ingrained in my brain. But anyways, so Alabama, that was a short-lived thing, and we were in Alabama when 9/11 happened. So my husband got deployed to Korea immediately after flight school, and then immediately to Iraq. So we moved home because I was pregnant with my 3rd at that point, and he was leaving. So I wanted to be around family. I know I was dealing with a child with special needs at this point because they were calling him globally developmentally delayed at this point. And I was going to have 3 children, and hubby was going to be gone. We did not know he was going to be gone as long as he was going to be gone. He wound up being gone a total of 22 months at that point. But I wanted to be surrounded by family. His family's from there. So, it was like surround myself with people that could help with the kiddos. So moved to Pennsylvania and happened to be going through more testing because I was very much a pusher for, okay, let's do every test in the world.
And for your parents out there, that's usually a good idea. Keep pushing. Don't take no for an answer when you know there's something not right.
Well, when we were at West Point, I mean, we actually traveled to Walter Reed down in D.C. and went through every every test from genetic testing to every test that we spent, I think 3 or 4 days there seeing every specialist, pediatric specialist, because we did not know, and still nobody was pinpointing it. You know what I mean? When we went to Alabama, we've traveled over to to Gulfport, Mississippi, Biloxi, to I can't think of the name of the Air Force base there. But we went there to see a pediatric developmentalist too. Still nothing. Then moved to Pennsylvania and happened to do a sleep-deprived EKG with a neurologist there. I'm not exactly sure what prompted that to get that done, but it got done. And that neurologist was the one who finally said, he's autistic.
Now, I know I asked you this in the little pre-interview that we did, but, since we're here now for the audience, at any point leading up to the diagnosis, did you suspect autism?
Yes, absolutely.
About
yes,
what point?
Absolutely. I would say right around the 1 year, 15 month, when I started noticing that he was missing those missing those milestones, because he didn't he didn't keep constant eye contact, and things like fans, lights, sounds. He still has a fascination with, if there's a hair on your shoulder, he will pick up that random hair and just sit there and play with that one strand of hair. And that was he still does it today. And that was like the one thing that the neurologist walked in, and he had like an intern in the room, and she was I think she was a Native American, descent, and she had very, very dark straight hair.
Okay.
And on the white lab coat, so like Noah picked
straight
up
hairs pop out.
yeah. So like he was literally, I mean, the only thing that was like disqualifying him all along was that he was social.
But I mean, come on.
But he had an older brother, and I never sheltered the kid. He had therapists in his life from a very young age, coming in. We moved. He changed school, you know what I mean? Like, so he kind of had to get used to transitioning a little bit. And he enjoyed going. He enjoyed going to school, and he enjoyed when the therapists came. You know what I mean? It was like a fun time for him. So I think a little bit of his socialization at the time was somewhat learned, because we didn't shelter him.
Right. And I mean, maybe back then they weren't as good at diagnosing as they are today, where it's not like you have to tick off every single box to get a diagnosis. It's like X number of X symptoms qualifies.
Right. And I mean, when I did get that diagnosis, my ex-husband was in Korea. That was the one and only time that I made a phone call to overseas in all of the deployments, that I felt the need to talk to him, because it was like, finally somebody said something. And even he was a little skeptical at that point that it was completely autism, because Noah does have a dual diagnosis of MR because of his IQ.
Okay. And MR?
Being mentally retarded.
Right.
Mental retardation.
Well, I think we just call it developmentally delayed now.
Yeah. So,
hey, KZ, is there anything going on in the chat? You've been quiet. It's been a while.
Not really. There was a comment back when you were talking about going through natural birth. Vanya mentioned that if we're a guy, imagine trying to stop going poo about halfway through.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'm sorry, names. My brain is not Mia. May. Okay, thank you. Mentioned there that she was assuming it was around 2000. I think you mentioned obviously he was born before 9/11.
Yes, 1998, June of 1998. Noah was born.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and they mentioned that it was before 2000 when autism wasn't very prominent.
exactly.
Yeah, I
So,
don't even think
and
I
it,
even heard of the spectrum back then.
yeah, and it was 2003 when he was diagnosed.
And during this time, what was happening to you, like emotionally, through all this? Because I mean, there's something wrong with your kid. You're not getting a diagnosis. I mean,
Yeah,
I can
and
only
Avani was
imagine.
just asked.
Yeah, and your husband's gone a good chunk of the time because
Hmm.
he's military. And
Hmm.
from I'm not military. I never served, so thank you to everyone who has served. But I have enough military friends and family to know that when you're with someone in the military, it's pretty much all consuming. So even their personal lives and their family lives and their kids and all that are they're there, but they're kind of kind of background. Is that about right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was definitely a challenging time. I mean, obviously, we when he left for Korea, we weren't at war yet. You know what I mean? We hadn't gone to war yet. The war broke out that March, and he was still in Korea. Came back from Korea in May, and then basically went directly over. So
And then how were you holding up during this?
I was going a little nuts. I mean, grateful to be around family because if I was stuck at a military installation somewhere 800 miles, 1200 and no help from family. I mean, I lived next to my best friend and her husband and their two kids. That was a godsend. We lived in a half a double, so I had support next door
Nice.
to just kind of keep me sane. I had just the support system of family at that time. And, when he finally got the diagnosis, Pennsylvania really stepped up to the plate. The state stepped up to the plate as far as providing him services. He was getting 40 hours a week of applied behavior analysis therapy,
Oh
which is
wow.
ABA therapy. So I had therapists in my house for 4 to 5 hours every day, pretty much.
Wow.
I mean,
Yeah, that's really
he was
stepping
a
up.
yeah, and he had speech, and he had OT, and he had physical therapy. So yeah, so and he had music therapy as well going on there because we lived a couple blocks away from a university that they provided music therapy for him. Music therapy's been a big part of his life. He loves it.
Nice. So basically,
Yeah,
you basically should have just installed a revolving door at that point.
yeah, yeah. So
Ivania was asking, how old were you when all this was going on?
how old was I? Well, 34 when he was diagnosed.
So you had
Or
him
no,
when you were
wait,
about 30.
32. No, I had my youngest at 30, so I had him at 98. I'm not good at these things. I was 26 when I had Noah.
Okay, so about 20, yeah,
So
about 30 when
I,
you got the diagnosis.
I think I got the diagnosis in between 30 and 31 because it was after Luke was born that I got the diagnosis, and Luke was born in, oh no, 2002. So
All right, and
30.
you got the diagnosis around, I mean, if it was around 9/11, that was, 2001.
No, I did not get the diagnosis at around 9/11. I did not have the diagnosis until 2003.
Okay.
I knew, 9/11. You know what I mean? We knew that there was clear sign. You know what I mean? Clear signs.
Yeah.
He was two, and I mean, when we lived at Fort Rucker, there was a lot of kids that were his age, and he just was nowhere near their levels on things. You know, but but I kept him involved still. I mean, we were only there for a very short time, and when you go to Fort Rucker, it's a very small community as guys going through flight school. So the wives tend to get very close because they're gone and doing a lot of studying, and it's just it's stressful time for them going through flight school. So we had little play groups that we would do. You know what I mean? So he was getting around other kids and at least getting some of those skills and that he should be. That was something that I never did, and I saw that a lot going through my journey, with Noah is that there are some parents out there that shelter their children, and it's kind of sad,
Yeah.
or and I mean, it depends on the level, and but it's not. I have learned that I'm not going to be ashamed of it. I'm not going to hide it. He is who he is. I love him to death, and I want him to be a productive part of society, and I want him to be accepted. And really, anybody who comes across Noah today and meets him just loves him to death. He's a great spirited kid, and
Awesome.
I helped mold that kid into what he is today, by making sure that he got the services that he needed. You know, um, I definitely got lost in that, definitely got lost in that process. But I will tell you what, I think that because of the military life and not having hubby around all the time, I think that kind of like, because I had that I was focusing so much on making sure that he was getting what he needed, that kind of took my mind off the fact that that he was gone. Like, I had to hold down the fort. Nobody else was going to,
Right.
you know? And I mean, that's just kind of what I did through all those deployments. And, I did do, everything was meticulously planned for me. I wouldn't leave Fort Campbell until Noah transitioned from elementary school to middle school, because I didn't want him to have to switch schools. So I said, okay, when fifth grade, we can move off post, because then he's got to go to middle school because he's got to change schools.
Now, listen to what she's saying here. She told the military, we are not leaving this post until... And they listened.
No, that was more. That was more me telling my husband, because he didn't want to live on post housing anymore. We were there for 6 years, and we could afford, we could afford a nice, a nice place basically, and we were there for 6 years, and it was just, we were getting cramped. There was 5 of us, and yeah, it
Yeah.
was getting old. You know what I mean? They also privatized housing through the military, so that turned into a whole new ball game too in the last couple of years that we lived on post, and started doing things differently that we didn't agree with and like. But I was like, no, man, I'm not moving until he's out of elementary school.
And
You know?
I remember back around 9/11, one of my best friends, his mom was married to an officer in the Marines, and I got to go check out the on-post housing for officers at USMC Miramar, and
Okay.
no, US. Well, basically, it's the Marine Air Station, Miramar, which
Mm-hmm.
used to be the Top Gun school for the Navy at one point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Even the officers kind of have cramped housing, so I can only imagine
Yes.
if you're not an officer, it's even worse. But if you're at West Point,
Well,
probably an officer.
we weren't when we were there.
Oh, really?
That was pre walk school. That was pre going into warrant officer school. We
So-
left West Point for him to go into flight school, and that's when he became a warrant officer. He was up there as basically the snow. He was an engineer, and he was his. I believe it was a lot of clearing snow. But then he also did work for the protocol office there, and did stuff with the general, which I think kind of turned him on to wanting to become a pilot.
Nice.
So, we had a very nice time at West Point. That was a beautiful, beautiful place to live. But, and Noah was born there. So it's a very special place to us. But, I'm trying to think where I'm kind of leaving off here.
All right. So you got the diagnosis. Philadelphia or Pennsylvania really stepped up big to the plate. And then
Yep.
eventually, as you're getting to basically sound like to the point where you're about to leave Fort Campbell.
Well, no, we moved to Campbell from Pennsylvania. So he
Right.
leaves for the Korea and the Iraq tour, comes back, and we have to go to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Now we go from Pennsylvania to Kentucky, where Pennsylvania's given me every therapy in the world, and I have people in my house every day, to go into Kentucky, where I have nothing.
Well, Kentucky.
Nothing. Yeah. Yeah, it was 2004.
Not to bash Kentucky, but Kentucky.
No, but it was. Yeah. So I
Just a
had to
different
go.
culture.
That applied behavioral analysis therapy had done so much for Noah in the amount of time from the time he was diagnosed to the time that we left Pennsylvania that I was like, I have to get him back into this therapy. I mean, I got him potty trained through that. I mean, there were so many milestones that he made and, you know what I mean, and learned and retained, like learning his ABCs, I mean, every there were so many things that he was making such great progress and it was showing results.
And I've heard that
Um,
sometimes potty training can take 6, 8 years.
oh
So
yeah.
you got the better end of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he
Some
was
never potty train.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Noah was potty trained for going pee on the potty at 4. He was not trained for going poop on the potty till he was 8. So, yes, I did deal with the poop until 8. And that was clear, that was completely a sensory thing because he stood all his life to do everything. And he did not understand why we were trying to sit him down on the potty.
He wanted to stand and poo.
Yeah. I mean, that's what he did his whole life.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, and it becomes, I mean, he literally used to like this fear. If you put him on the toilet, he used to get this fear, like, what are you doing to me? Like, this is not right because we had trained him early at 4 to stand to pee
Right.
on the potty. So sitting on the potty wasn't a thing for him. you know,
Right.
like even seeing, like bringing him in with me, that didn't work. You know what I mean? Like, I tried so many things and, but yeah, that was 8 years old and that was a feat. But yeah, potty train is definitely a thing. So anyway, so I moved to Kentucky. There's no services there. Um, and I mean, I'm scouring everywhere for an applied behavior analysis therapist that will come down to Clarksville because I mean, Nashville is the closest, biggest city to Clarksville. So I'm scouring Nashville and I find Jane. I will just name her first name, Jane. And she was in the field and she was in the area and she was willing to come down. And I
That's
believe I
awesome.
was, and I mean, and I was paying her cash and I think I was paying her mileage. We had to get her like a pass to be able to get on post to come on and service Noah, but she came down and it was like once a week she would come down. I used to tell her, I even had her, if she couldn't find a babysitter, I'd be like, bring your kids, I will watch your kids while you go do therapy with my kid.
That's
Because
awesome.
that's how, yeah, because like that's the kind of relationship we wound up building. But to talk furthermore about Jane and our journey, I mean, we were at Fort Campbell for 9 years.
That's a long
And,
time.
yeah, when I got there, there was no services. There was no, like, I couldn't find services. I found Jane, but there was advertisements of these support groups in the paper and in the Clarksville Parent Magazine. And I kept calling this lady, not getting in touch, not getting in touch. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. So I called the magazine and I'm like, I want to be put in there as a contact. Like, this is ridiculous. And I went to Army Community Services, which is, a resource for military families. Um, and I said, I want to start having a support group meeting here once a month for families with autism. And I got that done.
Nice.
And I made sure that it was open to the public so that, it didn't have to just be military families. We could have families come from off post, even if we had to go pick them up at the gate and bring them in our own cars, we brought them to this meeting.
I'm
If
just
they
going to say
reached,
this is post 9/11 era, so that's not easy.
yeah, no, that's not easy. And it was a process to get on post. So, I mean, it was a challenge but I mean, we had people turning out and, you know, we were able to set up a lot of different type workshops, such as one of the big things workshops was the IEP workshops because when your kids are going into school and an autistic child is more than likely going to have an individualized education program. I
Yep.
think
I was
that
just
is
going to say that because my daughter has IEP. So
is yes. Sorry, but so and also parental rights, knowing your rights in the public school systems. You know what I mean? As a parent with a special needs child that has an IEP in a public school system, you know, and
so
that was a big.
basically, what you're saying is that there was no anything, no tools to help your kid, help you with yourself, nothing.
No, yeah, nobody gives you a manual and says, "Here, this is what you need to do."
Right, and of course, and I'm sure that you and R are probably in the same boat in that it's like any tools you do get, it's like this is to help you with your kid, not this is to help you take care of you. This is to help you take care of your kid. I mean,
No.
self-care is important.
Yeah, which is why I approached the Army Community Service Building to get me a room so that I could get parents in a room.
Self-care.
Just because, I mean, just knowing that you're not alone.
Yeah.
I mean, I looked up the statistics. I mean, today it's 1 in 54 kids. So, I mean, that's a lot of parents too.
Yeah.
You know, to every 1 in 54 kids, you know, I mean, that's a lot of parents that are affected. And it's scary in the beginning. You don't know what the future of your child's going to be because because it is a spectrum disorder. I mean, Noah is on the lower end of the spectrum, but you've got the autistic savants. A lot of people put that stigma out there about Rain Man that autism means that, what are they good at? What are they specifically good at?
Right. That's just a fraction of the community.
It is such a small fraction of the autism community. Noah doesn't have one specific niche. But I mean, like, he likes things like fans, and he's obsessed with, if he comes into somebody's new house, he's going to come in and probably turn on every light in your house and turn on every fan he can. And if he can get his hands on some music, he's going to play your music.
Well, he's invited to my house.
Or a vacuum cleaner.
All right, put him to work.
Yes. So... But yeah, so sometime in between like about 2004 and 2007, I was, they had this program in the military called the ECHO program, and it provided about $3,000 a year in services for military children that had autism, which meant that his speech therapy, his occupational therapy, and his applied behavioral analysis therapy had to be paid out of that $3,000.
Oh, that's not going to pay for a year.
Well, I was paying Jane about $50 an hour.
Yeah, that $3,000 is nothing
at that time. You know what I mean? And she had only agreed with that because that was all I could afford. You know what I mean? She was worth more than that.
Jane, you're a saint. If you're listening,
she is. Yeah, and she will be if she's not now, but she will be.
Cool.
But I mean, like, so. I got involved with the Exceptional Family Member Program through the Army, and got trained as an advocate for military children, it's not just for military families. I'm an advocate for any family dealing with a disability, but it was funny on Fort Campbell because once I had educated myself, I was a force to be reckoned with. I wanted the special director at every meeting. I came in, I was salty and sweet. I came in with a recording device and cookies. I mean, you get more, bees with what flies with honey, whatever you want to say. You know
vinegar,
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I did sometimes have to go in there like a raging bull because, I was not happy. And then, once I started this support group and got families coming, I had a lot of families approaching me being like, and asking me to go to their kids' IEP meetings. So Fort Campbell school systems were a little mad when I was starting to show up with other families and representing other kids other than my own. They were like, oh no, they're bringing her.
So
You know what I
basically,
mean?
you became a huge advocate.
Yes, I did. And what I was going to say about like the Echo program, which was providing that $3,000, I wound up getting chosen to as one of the representatives. They chose a family member from every branch of service, and I was one of the family members of the Army branch to get chosen to not go to Washington D.C., but basically speak on what was going on with the fact that $3,000 was not enough to uh, cover costs for therapy for a child with autism for a year, and
Right.
got that changed from $3,000 to $36,000 a year.
Wow, that's a big increase.
So
It
I
was
got a couple of comments for you guys here.
sure.
Um, I didn't want to interrupt. They go back a little ways here. You got a bunch of them that says there's no need for you to be ashamed. You're an amazing mom, doing well. Bexy mentioned that sometimes with kids with IDD, the potty training doesn't happen. She's still dealing with a non-potty trained 34-year-old.
Yeah,
Um, and
that's real.
then Vanya mentioned that hearing the struggles of other parents, what other parents are dealing with, lets you know that you aren't alone, and that it's normal, and that you aren't failing. She also happened to post Jane's website in chat.
Yes. Jane,
Um,
Jane, I mean, because of what happened with TRICARE, with what I was just saying, that opened up doors for therapists to be able to actually go through the process of becoming TRICARE providers, being able to bill insurance. You know what I mean? That was like the beginning of the change of being able to bill insurance for services for autism, because it was such a big fight back then. And Jane, bless her heart, I mean, she fought the fought, went through all, I can't even imagine. I don't even want to know the amount of paperwork and everything that she went through to not only become a TRICARE provider, but a provider in other insurance agencies, where she's got, the website that uh, Vania posted, the ABC Services Consulting. She services about 30 families through that. She's got a side business called Pastiche Partners that services specifically TRICARE families, and they've got over 30 families in that aspect of her business. And they're actually looking at possibly merging here soon with an even bigger company to service more families. Like, they are growing amazingly. And she's got a great staff there now. And it's not only, she provides other services which help on different levels. We know that each autistic person is different,
Yep.
so their needs are different. So ABA therapy might not be the right therapy for every autistic person. So there's other therapies out there, and Jane's company definitely provides that. And anyone out there I would suggest looking at that if you have questions. Jane would be willing to reach out. She's a great woman, and I mean,
And
she even since I've moved out here to Colorado, she's been out here to see my son.
uh,
This woman is a blessed. I mean, she is dear to my heart.
and also what you were
So
just saying about how everybody with autism is different. I mean, that also ties into what we're doing here with this podcast. Everybody's different. Everybody responds to different therapies differently. As a matter of fact, I was on Whisper, of all things, yesterday, and I saw someone say that they went to one therapist, absolute waste of time, and said, don't ever go for it. Don't use therapy. It's awful. I'm more depressed now than ever. And it was really good to see in the comments, in the replies, a lot of people saying, just because that therapist was not a match for you is not a reason to, denounce all therapy. Go find different therapists that use different methods.
it's funny that you say that, because like I was forced to use other therapists in midterm while Jane was going through all that transition and getting TRICARE approved and all that stuff. And you know, autism is so tricky, but my son specifically is such he was a stinker. Oh, he was a stinker. And he knew when those therapists would show up at the door that if he pushed their buttons, cried tantrum, threw a fit, just basically refused to do the work. I mean, he just figured out so many therapists, and he would figure out how to misbehave enough to make them leave,
Wow.
you know?
He was gaming the
And
system.
yeah, and we had 2 hours of therapy scheduled, and like, I mean, these therapists were just like getting up, like, well, he's not ready to work today. I'm just gonna leave. Boom, I'm out the door. Jane came back into his life, and she was like, "Oh hell no!" She's like, she's like, we're gonna sit here, and I mean, like, he knew too, like, and he needed, like, he needs that firmness. Like, no, you're not gonna do that, dude. You know, and we literally like set up a timer system so that, like, okay, we're gonna work for 3 minutes, and then you get to do what you want for 3 minutes. I mean, like there's so many different ways to approach things, but I mean, he literally was manipulating every therapist that came in because he was like, haha, I'm just gonna do this and they'll leave and then I don't have to do anything.
Basically, like every classroom when the substitute teacher walks
Well,
in.
every toddler, basic, yeah, every kindergartner, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, like, I want to play, I don't want to do work, so yeah, we just kind of figured that out real quick, and when it was an amazing transition, and I mean, Noah's gotten to do equine therapy. He still today
Oh,
does
I
music.
love equine therapy.
Yeah, yeah, he hasn't done it out here in Colorado yet. I need to look into that because I know it is out here, and he enjoys it. But at Fort Campbell, obviously, Kentucky, Tennessee, there was plenty of that.
What?
So
Horses? I mean, there's no such thing as the
yeah.
Kentucky Derby.
So he got to do that, and and I don't know, just I mean, we started an autism walk on Fort Campbell, and, like, I don't know that that's still going on strong, but for the first couple of years, because of that support group, I mean, it was amazing. you know I mean, I want to say, I mean, I can't remember the exact numbers of what we raised, but I mean, it was significant for the 5 years that I was part of that, and
Nice.
raising money for things for the autism community and being able to donate that, you know what I mean, back.
And are you still that active in Colorado? Or have you kind of taken a step back?
I have taken a step back. My life has definitely changed since coming to Colorado. I've since gotten divorced, and Noah is
Oof.
actually with his dad full time. But that was part of the decision that dad was gone for a long, I mean, total 12 years. I mean, he left when Luke was 3 weeks old,
Right.
basically, and was gone every other year. And even when he was back, he was going to California to train, to Louisiana to train before a deployment, having to take the aircraft to Jacksonville. Like, I mean, the time that he spent home was not spent home.
Right.
I they like to say that they, oh yeah, they get 12 months off in between. No, no, because there's 6 weeks here, 6 weeks there, 6 weeks. You know what I mean?
It may
Like,
be 12 months stateside, but that doesn't mean 12 months home.
that's right. Absolutely. So yeah, and when you've got school age children, it's not like you can just pick up and go with them to wherever they go for 6 weeks. That's just not feasible.
And in Colorado, since you're there, and you being such the force that you are, is it safe to assume that you did look into services at Colorado?
I knew I wanted to be here in the end of our military career. I knew Colorado or Hawaii. Those were the two states that I knew that adult services would be there for my child. And yes,
Awesome.
it was completely planned. I wound up having a granddaughter in 2014, so Hawaii wound up going out the window. My ex went to Korea basically to get us to Colorado because when you go to Korea, you basically get to choose where you come back to. So we had the choice between Hawaii and Colorado, and I just didn't want to be an ocean away from my granddaughter. If I needed to get in a car and go to Tennessee, then
Yeah.
Colorado's closer than having to get on a
I
plane
mean, you could
to get there.
try going in a car from Hawaii to California, but I don't think you'll get very far.
Yeah, no. So that was kind of it. But I mean, like, I'm also a skier, so that was a huge thing of being here. But we moved here when Noah was 15. We moved here in 2014, 15, 16. So he stayed in the school system until 21 because he had an IEP, and I kind of had that, that kind of worked out so that he was here for 5 years before needing adult services.
All right, and
We had to kind of
what kind
put
of
him to
help?
work.
What kind of help did you find for you in Colorado? Was there anything, or for you
No.
or your husband?
No,
Is there anything now?
not that I know of. I mean, there's services there for Noah.
Which is great. I mean, I'm not trying to take away from
I
that.
mean,
That is the best part.
and that does help us. I mean, obviously, you know what I mean? Like, gives us a break, like he goes to respite care on Saturdays and stuff. Gives us, a little reprieve, stuff like that. Um,
So, like, what did you do for your own self-care? Like, say through this whole process, like Fort Campbell and Colorado and all the planning. Like, what did you do
well,
for you?
I mean, it was cathartic to learn all my rights as a special needs parent. You know what I mean? Like, and also, and and starting that support group, which ran for a very long time. My name is still in the Clarksville Parent Magazine. There, they've never taken it out.
So
I
you're
still
probably
get,
still getting calls.
yeah, I still get calls 7 years later. And I will, give out, you know, shout outs to Jane and her and ABC Consulting Services, and also Full Spectrum Therapy, which provided him with his occupational therapy and speech therapy in Clarksville, Tennessee. Here in Colorado Springs, the one thing that I liked about coming here is that I didn't have to fight for things. That
Nice.
it was very, I mean, easy to get into. I mean, we may have had to wait a little bit, but I mean, like, I think we were still living in a hotel when he was in OT and speech. And the eye opener was that when Fred went to Korea before we came to Colorado this time, so when he went in 2013, and we moved back to Pennsylvania for that year because I thought, okay, we'll go home while you're in Korea again, be with family for a year because services should be there for him. Oh no, things changed. I mean, I barely got him into occupational therapy after being there for 6 months, and we were only there for a year.
Wow. So basically, when Pennsylvania first had everything that you needed, things had changed, and those
Yeah,
programs started to dry up. It sounds like.
yeah, basically it was 13 years later, and there was nothing. And I was like, okay, we can't stay, and that's all of our homes. You know what I mean? Our parents are you know what I mean? Their grandparents are there. My sister's in Delaware. Like his sister's there. The cousins are family. Everybody's there, but it's just not ideal. It's just not ideal. It's a dying town. Scranton, Pennsylvania. If you know the office, that's where we grew up.
Wow. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
KZ and I actually share. I mean, it's my hometown, and he lived there long enough. I'm sure that he probably still considers it home. Also dying.
Yep.
But it's like when you start talking about like going to other states, like it's no big deal. Us on the West Coast that didn't live on the East Coast, where your states are really small, that's just unimaginable. It's like, oh yeah, like, okay, Nevada, sure, that's a few-hour drive, but like say Oregon, Arizona, Idaho.
Well, from where we grew up, though, I mean, Oregon's a pretty close one. But
Yeah.
then you're like, hey, I'm going to go to Disneyland. It's the same state, but it's 8 hours away.
Right. Or if you're like,
Yeah.
I'm going to go to SeaWorld, that's 10 hours away.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
But we got a couple of comments here. You just there's a lot. Way to be an advocate. You're amazing. Back when you were mentioning that you had other therapists come in, and he was running them out. And when Jane came back, May said, "Tough love is still love."
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then Ivania said, "It sounds like your self-care was empowering yourself to help others and not have to struggle like you did."
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, because I mean, like, I'll tell you what, moving from Pennsylvania to Kentucky because Noah went into kindergarten when we were in Pennsylvania right before we left, and we left in February. So he started the school year in Pennsylvania in a full day kindergarten program in Pennsylvania, and we moved to Kentucky in the middle of the school year, which I hated. I hated doing to my children. That was probably one of the only times that I did do it, but we had no choice. Um, and they tried to put him in a half day. And that was the point where I went home and I got on the internet. I stayed up, I think, till 3 in the morning learning my rights. And I marched my butt back into that school the next morning. Like, I mean, I was like, I don't think I slept that night. I think I slept in bed with my arms crossed. I was so mad. You know what I mean? About what I just read and what? No, and by the time I walked out of that school the next day, they didn't have a full day program, but my son stayed there and ate lunch with the teachers in between the morning program and the afternoon program because I was like, no, you're going to provide that. Sorry. That's what he came from. That's what he
Nice.
deserves.
So they did the best they could, which was to span him across 2 programs.
Yeah, I mean, they couldn't create a full day program, obviously, just for my
right, especially in the middle of a school year.
Yeah. So, but yeah. So, I mean, like, that was amazing. And then, I mean, the other thing about that struggle is that when we moved to Fort Campbell, we spent about 6 weeks in a hotel waiting for on post housing. 5 people in a hotel room, in an efficiency type hotel room. So you can imagine what that was like, okay?
Not optimal.
Yeah, it was crazy. And they put Noah I mean, we had to enroll the kids in school because we were in the middle of the school year. So they were picking basically up my kids up from the hotel on post and busing them to school. And they thought we were going to live in one part of post, and they put Noah in Lucas Elementary. And then they put us, when we did get in housing, we were in a different housing part, which all those kids went to Jackson Elementary. So we move into a cul-de-sac on Fort Campbell where there are 8 other kids that are the same age as Noah, but they go to a different school that's literally across the street from the school that he's going to. And Noah had this thing about walking around the circle with a wagon. And I just remember that summer, like them all just kind of going, and eventually I called a little powwow and I had them all come over to the driveway and we had a little powwow because they wanted to know what was wrong with him. Could they catch it?
Yeah,
why does he just walk around and look at us and doesn't say anything? And stuff like that. So we had a little powwow with all the little kids that were his age about, he's not going to bother you. You know what I mean? He may stop and look at you. He's just happy wheeling his little wagon around the cul-de-sac. You know what I mean? And
no, it's not contagious.
Exactly. No, it's not contagious. You can't catch it. It's, it's the, different wiring of the brain. He, looks at lights differently. He may he loves flags. He loves to fly flags. He loves weather. You know what I mean? So he loves storms. He loves sitting out on the porch when it gets really windy because the flags start going and the wind chimes start going, so.
Not going to lie. I'd be right there with him. I love that stuff too. Not going to lie.
But, yeah, so, but I learned real quick that, I had 8 other kids that were in the same grade as him that were going to a different school that didn't know how to react to my kid that were living in the same cul-de-sac as me.
That's kind of an issue.
Yeah, and then the special ed bus that was picking him up to take him to the other school was getting him to school 8 minutes late every day. And I went into supermom mode and I started following the bus to find out why he was 8 minutes late. Because if you add 8 minutes up over 180 days of a school year, that's about a week, 5 days of school that he was missing.
And that's a lot.
Yeah.
That is actually a lot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I went in there. I'm like, can I charge you with truancy because you're not getting my kid to school? That's you're busing him. He should be at school on time. So long story short, the next school year, my youngest was going to school. He was going to kindergarten. And he was going to Jackson Elementary because we were in that housing development. So now my kids were going to be in two different elementary schools too, which I also had a problem with. And the school bus driver had a child on the spectrum, and she was coming to my autism support group meeting for Jackson Elementary. She was picking up all the kids in my cul-de-sac to go, including my youngest. And I said, you know what? I said, he's going to ride the regular bus. He's got 8 other second graders here at the time. You know what I mean? Like and his little brother. And, and a bus driver who has a child who's on the spectrum who was also riding the bus. I mean, we just he was able to get on the bus and have enough kids to look out for him. And I mean, most of these kids, once he transitioned to Jackson, I mean, they looked out for Noah, you know what I mean? And they all love him. And, I still get, stuff from them and stuff like that. And, when we left Jackson, I just have to share this because this was something that was near and dear to me. When we left Fort Campbell, one of Noah's aides who was with him throughout elementary school wrote to me on Facebook. She said, Shelley T, Godspeed. Safe travels, and thank you so much for educating us on autism. I do not think anyone who walked through Jackson Elementary during the Noah years wasn't touched in some way by his wonderful attitude and great personality. We appreciated you answering our many questions and the books and info sessions that you did to help us be better teachers for children with autism. I think you are a great advocate, a great friend, and most of all, an awesome mom.
That's amazing. And honestly, when you
took
your kids,
it still brings tears to my eyes because
I can see it.
I mean, like this woman, when my husband was deployed, this woman delivered flowers on my door on Mother's Day.
Aww.
You know what I mean? Just to break my day. So, I mean,
and
yes.
I will say, just from my time in school, kids can be real jerks, and you taking that time with the powwow and getting the kids to understand, I think that was absolutely huge in helping Noah have a very good time at that school as opposed to what he could have had.
Absolutely. And what Teresa was talking about in that post is in educating them. That was something that I did at the beginning of every school year for every class. We would go in with 2 books and read to the class. I would schedule it with the teacher. Noah would participate in that. We had a book called Ian's Walk that he loved reading. It was about an autistic boy going on a walk with his sister to the park, and he does all these weird things along the way, like sniffs the post office wall, and they go in the store and he's looking at the fans, and he's just doing weird sort of things, and they get to the park and they're going to get pizza, and they turn their backs for 2 seconds and he disappears, and they go into a panic, and all of a sudden they hear the bell ring in the center of the park, bong, bong, bong. And Noah used to do that part of the story. He used to love that part of the story. He would, and yeah, so he loved that. And for the life of me, and I reached out to Teresa, and I'm like, what was the other book? I cannot remember, but it was basically an elementary level of explaining autism to the kids that it's not contagious. They may just do things a little differently. You know what I mean? And you're, just be their friend. Be kind.
I cannot, for the life of me, remember the name of the character that they brought on to Sesame Street, but they did bring on a puppet that had autism. And
is it Abby?
Yeah, I think so. And Big Bird really struggled with it at first, and they did a great job on really explaining. Like Abby freaked out when there were sirens. And some some people are so with autism get really sensitive to that kind of stuff, and they do freak out. Yes. And it was really good because, I could watch my own kids, taking that in. and starting to be able to understand that, some kids are different. That doesn't mean they're bad. That just means they're different.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. And I mean, we have to be a more accepting society. I mean, if we're looking at 1 in 54 people and 1 in 4 boys, I mean, my ultimate goal for Noah is obviously to be a productive part of society. That's all I want for him. He's never going to live alone. He will always be with me or his dad or with someone. He will always need someone to be with him. I his IQ, he just did an IQ test in January where he scored a 40 overall.
Wow.
And actually R and I were going over that, there is some of the age equivalents, like his receptive age is a 3-year-old, 8 months, expressive 2.4,
Wow.
written 6.2, daily living skills 3, domestic skills 4.
So he's kind of all over the board.
Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting. I mean, he's considered to be moderately delayed, apparently, but his age equivalence is a total of 5 years, 3 months.
Which, yeah, and he's in his 20s.
22.
Yeah.
22. He turned 22 in June. Yeah.
And KZ's just letting the chat stack again.
I am. Now, there's... Oh, shoot. Okay, let's go back here a little ways.
Hey, you got to start jumping in a little sooner, bud.
Hey, people get on a roll, and I'm like, I don't want to
interrupt.
I
know.
It's like, Alicia jumped in there, said thanks for your time and energy. And then Vanya mentioned when they were in Fort Bragg to Fort Carson, they were supposed to live on base, enrolled the kids in. I got an eye doctor appointment on Tuesday, so I should hopefully be able to read a little better next week. If I get my glasses that quick. Enrolled the kids in the on-post school. Housing fell through, so they moved to the complete other side of the city, and so she kept carting her kids back and forth so they wouldn't have to switch schools again. Yeah. Said it was rough. Can only imagine your struggle with a special needs child. And then Bexy...
who drops the hammer on this one.
Oh, God. Yeah, this is great. She said once she took her bro to the doctor, he sat and played with some kids. Their mom looked terrified and disgusted and called her kids back over. And she told her, hey, lady, kids won't catch what he has, but they might catch your ignorance if you don't watch it. Like, oh, yeah, that's a truth bomb for him.
Yeah, even though Adam is Bexy's brother, Bexy plays Mama Bear right there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then there's a bunch of people saying that they love Bexy right there. And she's got no tolerance for nastiness, especially when it comes to her brother there, Adam. And then, it says, lucky that Adam is like the most lovable kid ever. Very rarely does she ever encounter that. And then she also mentioned that there's also Julia on Sesame Street, who's also autistic. Adam still watches it from time to time.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of, was Julia.
Oh, Julia, yeah.
Yeah. No, Abby, I think, was actually pretty normal. It's Julia that's... I think Abby has... Is she the one with the... Oh, gosh, like the crutches, basically? I mean, they're not crutches, but,
She might be disabled in some way, yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Like Jimmy on South Park.
Good Lord. One thing there was something I wanted to touch base on about being a mama bear. It comes out, it definitely comes out. And when you know that your child should be getting something and he's not, you know. I mean, that was one thing I like kind of stood behind. Like, you know, a lot of school systems like to play the we don't get money. Like, we don't have the money to provide that. We don't have the money to give aids, and that's something that they can't say, you know.
Right.
Um, you know, as a child who has an IEP, the school systems get money for that. And then when a military child goes to a public school, so like when we were in Pennsylvania, not only did he have an IEP, but he was a military kid, so there was money on top of that they were getting. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, like don't say that to me, you know.
Yeah, don't say that there's no money when my kid literally comes with a check
Yeah.
from the military.
Yeah. But I mean, like, I was there. I mean, I volunteered in the schools. I was there. I mean, I volunteered in both of my kids' classrooms every week, you know, and was there and was very involved. And, you know, I think we were very, very lucky. You know, I mean, we didn't experience something bad kind of happening with Noah until middle school when we moved off post and he went to middle school. And Noah's reporting, like, if you ask Noah, what did you do today at school? He's going to say good. He can't tell you what happened today at school. So he's just going to, like, he can get his basic wants and needs across to you. You know, he's hungry, he's thirsty, whatever. You know, he's got to get to the bathroom or he wants to do something, stuff like that. But as far as explaining something that happened, no. It's usually like very short. You know, it's very short. Like, and there was at one point he came home after being on the bus and he said that a black kid spit on him.
And it looks like she just froze. I'm hoping it's not my internet.
And that was very traumatizing. You know,
Yeah, we're having some connectivity issues, it looks like.
I think he's internet's cutting out there a little bit.
oh,
Is it me?
is it me?
Now, I think it's you, Eric, because I'm able to hear her just fine. Dropped again. I know, what the hell. It's been a minute. It's been a minute.
Oh, my internet sucks right now.
Minute.
Just,
Yeah, he froze her.
okay.
You gotta tell your son to quit downloading the adult stuff in the other room.
Yes. I mean, he is 25, but still.
So now I lost my train of thought. Crap. Anybody want to tell me what I was talking about?
Jeez, I even forgot.
You were mentioning the way he was describing school and that, and then he came on to kids
about the
spit
black
on
kids
him.
Yeah,
spit
so
on
I
him.
mean, like, but I mean, like, that's all we got. Like, and what do you do? I mean, like, that it breaks your heart, you know, that somebody would do that to him. But like, what do you do? Go to the school and line everybody up? No, like, come on. But you know, I mean, like, it's stuff like that that makes it hard. You know, I mean, and I mean, like this. Also, I mean, his pain tolerance. Like, I watched the kid fall when he was 4 years old riding a bike, and I knew he broke his arm. I knew he broke his arm. And I did this where I was twisting his arm over and over, and I never did the arm to shoulder, like to touch the shoulder. And the next day I went to put a coat on him, and he screamed bloody murder. So like he was like all night with a broken arm, and I didn't know.
Wow.
You know, so like there's a certain level of pain tolerance there for him, you know, and he's been through a lot. He really has. And that could be a whole different podcast. I don't really even want to get into it because if I do, it's gonna just bring up a whole different topic.
No
So,
worries.
but you know, he is really thriving out here in Colorado. He's got some, you know, he does occupational therapy, he does speech therapy, he does music therapy. He goes to community services 3 times a week. where he's out in the community. Now during COVID, it's definitely changed. They can't do stuff, not a lot of stuff. They're really going to parks and stuff and keeping, they have to keep their social distance and their masks on. Masks are mandatory. But for a while, they stopped there, and he was doing nothing. And that can be sometimes detrimental to an autistic child who is on routine and likes routine.
Right. I was going to ask how he's handling COVID. Thank you for jumping in on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think boredom has definitely been an issue. Things have started back up, thank goodness. But they are still, again, limited. I was talking with his dad about what they're doing with community services, because what they normally do is they go out and they go to the movies or they go out to lunch and they have him order his food, pay for his food. Like, they're teaching him money skills. They're teaching him how to order, teaching him how to interact, or to get on a bus, you know what I mean? How to pay, like just little life skills, stuff like that. We did have a resource here in Colorado called DVR. And that was a resource that was supposed to help him with getting into the job phase of the world, basically. He can only work so many hours, obviously, because of some of his services and stuff like that. But they kind of dropped the ball, as my ex explained to me, and kind of put it on him. And he did not like that. And he was like, if you're not going to help, like, they were like, here, you go find the services, you go find the person to help him find the job, you go find. And it was like, well, and he was like, this is your job. This is what you're supposed to be doing. Like, you're supposed to be finding the places that will accept, kiddos and someone to come in with a job coach, you know what I mean? Because he does need to be
frozen again.
Someone to go with him to train him.
I hope this picks back up again.
So but
we're having more connections problems.
I see that. But, so that's kind of fell through the roof. I mean, he, that
son, actually about the same age as your son there. And he's a little developmentally delayed, not anywhere near your son, but he has problems with numbers, slightly dyslexic. And there's a place up in our hometown area that basically takes the people that have some issues and tries to get them into a workforce. And it's they do stuff as far as, you can work in the recycling center helping, weigh the cans and get, pay people out that way. Or they have another area where they make, benches and stuff that they sell.
Mm-hmm.
The opportunity center.
Wood. That's it, exactly. And you can buy fence planks there far cheaper than the hardware store down the road.
Right.
But
and they're good quality.
Yeah, they are, and it's a great place for it, because I've watched, there's been a lot of kids who've, gone through there, and, there's some that are been there for years and years and years, and they'll keep them there as long as they need to. If it's, for everything, they'll do whatever they can. They even have a group of kids that go down to like the Forest Service and do, cleaning of the Forest Service grounds and stuff. So it's kind of nice when you have, a place like that is willing to help get them going. Unfortunately, it sounds like you kind of ran into a snag there with yours, though.
Yeah, but I don't think that it's forever gone. You know what I mean? I don't think that's
Yeah.
a forever gone resource. I think that just requires a little bit more digging. There's definitely more companies out there that are willing to work with people with disabilities. So, I think it's just a matter, and when Noah, when you're in the school system and when you hit 18, you basically graduate and then you go into what's called the transition system from 18 to 21. And they had that in that transition system, and he got the chance to go like twirl the sign at a coffee shop, you know what I mean, and go to Walmart and do like hanging up you know what I mean? Like, so he's had the opportunity to go and do things like that, but unfortunately now that he's out of the school system and has to rely on other resources, we just have to kind of find them. I know they're out there, but I mean, he does have a lot going on. Like a lot of people, I don't know, I've watched Dateline, things on autism and stuff like that, and I have watched parents describe, transitioning out of school at 21 in certain states like being pushed off a cliff.
Oh, I don't doubt that.
Yeah, I could imagine for sure.
Because waiting for services in some of these states, the waiting list, I mean, I think in Florida, it's like 20 years. Okay. That's like waiting for, or no, wait, I'm sorry. I think maybe it's like 20,000 people or something. It's like waiting for 20,000 people to die.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if there's a waiting list of 20,000 adults with autism waiting for services in a state, that's
either 20,000 people have to either stop receiving services, or there needs to be services added on that could take on another 20,000 people.
Well, what the issue is because if you think about it, if you've got two working parents, which is most of society these days, when your kid turns 21 and there's no services and resources and they have nowhere to go now, they were going to school 5 days a week, or they were going, you know what I mean? They were going somewhere, and now they have nowhere to go. So now one parent's got to be home, and there's a loss of income. There's a level of, all kinds of different emotions there.
Oh, depression for sure.
Right there. Geesh.
And then there's that risk with some people with autism of regressing because they're not getting that daily interaction.
Absolutely, and that does happen, and that was also a big fight that I had to fight with the school systems throughout the years, because a lot of the times they would say no, it was too functioning or whatever for the summer school program, which he was entitled to go to.
And knowing your rights, you were able to push that. Like, I know what you're trying to say, and I know what you're trying to do, but the fact of the matter is...
He needs the consistency. He does not do well when he is not on a schedule. He gets a little all over the place. He can get into things. He can get into trouble. Wander off. Poor Campbell, he wandered off naked one time out the back thing. Somebody brought him back naked.
Yeah. Oh, I've heard stories about that kind of stuff all over the place.
But and then I remember too, like this was another thing that was big for me, like for him, because when he was little and when you were hearing horror stories about kids wandering off and drowning in ponds, or there was one year where a kid wandered off in the winter and froze.
Right. They don't know. Some of those kids, they just don't know how to prepare for that kind of stuff.
Well, right. Wandering, like that kid, I believe, that froze wandered off with, no shoes on. You know what I mean? Like in the middle of winter in Kentucky where there was snow on the ground and it was 30 degrees. You know what I mean?
Right.
Whatever. It was
probably just went out to go enjoy the snow.
Yeah, whatever. And that kind of stuff scared me. So swimming was a must. You need to know how to swim. So he knows how to swim. He's not an excellent swimmer, but he can get him. If we throw him in a pool, he'll freak out a little bit, but he's going to get himself to the side because he knows how to swim.
Perfect.
So, you know what I mean? He knows how to get to himself to safety.
He can rescue himself.
Yes. Well, yeah. I don't know about being in maybe, white water. Or something like that. Right. But in a pool, yes. Like in a pool, yes. You know what I mean? Something that doesn't have a riptide or
Right.
a current.
Well,
I
even
would
the
be
best
fine.
swimmers there have trouble, so.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but I mean, he knows how to swim. That was something that was like, yeah, you got to know how to get to yourself to safety, get yourself to the side, and get yourself out of that situation. The other thing that was a big thing that when we were in Nashville, I took advantage of a lot of stuff that was, or in Clarksville, I'm sorry, I took advantage of a lot that was going on at Vanderbilt University.
Oh, good.
Research studies, and also things that were going on in Nashville. He got to learn how to ride a two-wheeler. You know what I mean? He was on a
Nice.
big. You ever see those tricycles with the big basket on the back?
Oh,
that
yeah.
They have kind of adults.
Yep.
Well, he had one of those for a while, and he used to carry his little brother in the back, and our little dog in the back, and he thought he was, the hot thing around around Gandy Court, around the little cul-de-sac there, Fort Campbell. Well, I'm like, okay, enough is enough. You need to ride a bike. You know what I mean? You need to
Right.
ride a bike. So we got him up there to Nashville, and we got him on a two-wheeler. So yeah, it's like little things like that. We've even got him on skis. That was a little bit of a feat, but
Right. Now, I mean, not to try to cut this too short, but we have been going for about an hour and a half now. Does anybody have any questions? Is there anything in the chat? Do you have any other final things you want to talk about? I'll go for it, KZ.
We got a couple of things in the chat here. Just last couple of comments here. When we were talking about the adult services where they can go and get help later on in life. There, Bexy mentioned that she's so lucky that Adam has an amazing day hab that he goes to Monday through Friday, and it's run by his former high school teacher.
that's awesome.
Yeah, and then Adam has left the house in a t-shirt and a pull-up before. Thankfully, he just went across the street to play basketball with the neighbors.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens.
So
But
you
I
have,
mean,
you have any final thoughts or anything?
I don't think so. I think I've covered everything.
Nice. Yeah, because I mean, we've been kind of at this point for the last 20 minutes or so, kind of meandering a little. So it
Yeah.
sounds like we kind of got to the end.
Yeah, I think so. I think I got my point across. I'm happy. I think, but I'll probably listen to it later and go, man.
Yeah, there's going to be a few things that you're going to listen to it and be like, oh, I should have mentioned this. Oh, I should have mentioned that. It happens. And that's part of the reason why we're pushing to try to get a website in the future. And
Sure.
but the one thing I definitely would like to see before that, your audio is better than the co-hosts. We need to get that guy some equipment.
That's funny.
Hey,
Well,
at least I got a good internet connection, though.
Oh.
I only have this pretty headset because of work, so.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not going to name my internet provider, but they tend to come last, so.
Oh, dear Lord.
Alrighty.
Well, I thank you for letting me.
Yeah, thank you for
Share.
coming, Shelley T. We definitely appreciate it, even though you
Yeah.
actually did name drop your full name.
Did I?
Yes, you
I
did.
did. Oh, well, I don't care. People can contact me because you know what? That's the kind of person I am.
Yeah, and they also know where to look to find your phone number anyway.
Well, that's okay. I won't answer it if I don't know you, so you have to leave me a message if you really want to talk to me.
All right. All right. Again, thank you very much for coming on. Definitely appreciated you having you on the show.
Yep.
And looks like this is just about the end. Just got one final little message I want to push out, and then we'll call it a night.
If you like what you hear and you want to help support the show, hit like on this episode and give us a follow. Also follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/mentallivecast, all one word. This way you can stay up to date with what is happening between episodes. Also, share this episode and your favorite episodes with others that you think might enjoy the show or might benefit from listening to it. And if you want to help the show grow, go to our Spreaker page at www.spreaker.com/show/mentallivecast. Again, all one word. Go to the description area and expand it, and at the bottom you will see different ways that you can go ahead and donate to the show. We have plans on expanding the show beyond just being a podcast, and we need your help getting there.